The mist veils the mountains and the villages. Perforated by the 1,000 pricks of pine needles. That bristle on the slopes and slowly dissipates among the quivering rice stalks. On paddies carved out of the mountains. It lends a pensive mantle to the majesty of the cluster of rice terraces. It meets the steam from the villages, coming from the pots where dyes, yarn, and mud mix, which in time and with patience will unfurl as intricate textiles made by deft hands and pulled out from the cultural treasury of a community. For many centuries, textiles have been woven by the Ifugao. One of the indigenous groups that inhabit the upland interiors of the Cordillera region of northern Luzon Island in the Philippines. The Ifugao people are known for their centuries-old rice terraces, recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, as well as its cycle of chants called hudhud. And the harvest ritual of Punnuk, included in the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage of the world. Even in these times, the Ifugao are able to preserve much of its rich traditional culture, including textile weaving and many aspects of its process. Many indigenous communities in the Philippines still practice hand weaving and the ikat, a technique of dyeing in which threads are tied to create patterns including the Ifugao, who make textiles of plain weave as well as more complicated ones such as fabric with warp float design. Like many weaving communities in the country, they use the backstrap loom since the olden days. And they also use the pedal loom, which were recently introduced. Other modern conveniences have also been adopted.
So the process of weaving is first you have to purchase the thread, and we are sorry that we don't grow our own cotton here. Maybe in the future, if some the DA or FIDA will help us, then maybe we can grow cotton, because right now cotton is grown in Ifugao, but it's found in Asipulo, and we can grow that. But first, we purchase the cotton from Baguio or Manila. Then we wind it, putting them into balls. And then we warp them. After warping them, then if it is for ikat, then we have to tie them. But if it's just for the pick-up design, then we just warp them and then start weaving.
For dyeing, many weavers resort to commercially available dyes. But many still retain the use of traditional vegetable dyes, and more are now rediscovering and reviving this traditional process.
For ikat, we have to do the process of mud dyeing, or we can even use certain different kinds of dyes that we find around. We use turmeric for yellow color. We use kogon for yellow color. We use mayana for light green color. And we use the betel nut, the betel lime for red and brown colors. And for the indigo blue, or the grayish or blackish, that's the time that we use the hawili, the blue, and the mud for coloring them.
We are using the blue leaf and the bark of the tree, hawili. That is the materials that we are using. We are going to find in the forest. The blue is rare to find it. So we have to walk a distance like 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, depends. So this is the one. This is the one. So this is the blue. Blue. So the blue is found. If we find it, then we get it and then bring home to use for our weaving, for the dyeing of the thread.
The use of mud in the dyeing process is one of the most interesting aspects of the Ifugao textile making. In some traditional weaving communities in the Philippines, weavers use in dyeing a mordant, a substance to fix the colors on the materials to make them more vivid or to create a different shade. Mud is used as one of the mordants. Aside from the Ifugao, the Mandaya and Maguindanao peoples of the southern part of the country and the Bontoc in the Cordillera region also use mud in their traditional dyeing process.
Mud dyeing, it's a process of coloring or dyeing our ikat, and it is a tradition that had been passed on from one generation to the other. We cannot recall how many generations old it is. But when we grew up, mud dyeing was already being done. But as I told you, it was like diminishing. So it is now only that we revive it. And mud dyeing is using natural dyes, natural materials for coloring our plant, using the mud as maybe an agent to darken that red.
Sa pagkuha po ng putik, pumupunta po kami sa bukid. Kung ano po yung tinuro noon ng mga matatanda na lola na gumamit ng mud, doon lang po kami kumukuha ng mud. Tapos dinadala po namin dito sa center. Then ginagamit po namin sa dyeing ng ikat.
There are certain areas in the rice paddies or ponds where they get the most suitable iron-rich mud for the dyeing process. They gather the mud with their bare hands and put them in buckets, all done with calmness and reverence, as they believe that spirits reside in the place. Doing so guarantees the success of the dyeing process.
Ot ni hidi en pangalan hipito ya ot hidi intudun nan hiapuan imabu abol an nabayag ya adimet mabalin nan udum alon day hituwe nangangalan mi pito nadamit nan naunan numpun abol di na itudu idanay tenan udum ang pito ya adi mabalin. Ot mahapol an alyon igre nan nabobod o ya eta umalah pito ya hawili ya bulu-bulu o ya ahimah pe ya ang
Inhang boya inula-ulahan. Ya ahimah pe ihape. Basta hindi lang ang color di iparwarnan pito.
The dyeing process can be tedious, but the master weaver and textile dyers know from experience and age-old wisdom when the threads being dyed are ready, when and how to use the mud, even without the use of clocks or times. In the old days, this process is accompanied by ritual.
Number one is we have to build fire and then put the water and estimate kung how many kilos, and then after maybe 30 or 1 hour for the boiling, and then we soak hawili, the bark of the tree. And then when we see that when the bark is parang and then we put the bulbulu. We have a timing also that if we see that the bulbulu and the hawili are yung parang may ano pangalan niya? And then extra. And then we remove the materials, the bulbulu and the hawili. We strain it and then we put the thread. Then after an hour also, if we see that the thread is not yet boiled, then we have to repeat it again. Until we are kontento na naluto siya. After removing the thread into the bath, then we have to scrub the mud. And then wash it until the water is clear. And then when the thread is not yet boiled or colored, then we have to put it again and then remove it again and scrub again until when it is already colored. After that, then we have to dry it, and then after drying, we have to remove the untying. Yan.
Talagang diferensya may pito ti. Ot nanday inipod di anday. Da punday. Ot tinay dito umet yung mga pod inay.
Balin ng pito nung peya ng kayo, yan yung balin di color na. Ote kas ano nga, hinay garud di may habayatan to uhi NID mo din ot ano san tuunan punhaangan. Te hidi rigat na te manuhanan e pangalan te agaga ngandang punhaangan ya talagaan yaw algo.
Textile weaving and dyeing also serve a social function, promoting cohesion in the family and community.
Ay hanya nan at hituteya mo an weaving center an utni. Wa emeton ne waday training tu o ya imali dani an diurum o te hitu ani organization tu mo tu ot ma idha ot mait po organization dang maun-unu danda an way hado hamit tonunu na porten na utun da po hamuna por o ya mahimbo bagada o alon da ngane ID aton itu o yani nahintu tuddu da.
I learned to weave from my mother. I was still in the elementary. When she leaves her weaving, I take over. Sometimes I destroy it and she patiently put it back. And then later on, I have grandparents. I have a grandma, a great-grandma who just weave all the time, all the years that he was alive, he have been weaving. So I learned the process from her. And for the these natural dyes, I learned from all the master weavers and the master tyers, which are mostly relatives and mostly from Hinyon and Banao.
Ay nun adala apun duduli. Panapa hindi yung bakit nun adala. Te ot simpre mo ita farmer tagarud o yan arpah mo. O yang ane mo hantam-tamuan ya tiktiko hiya ya umabu awol ariona umari ata itu duanda. O di itu duana iya ya monan inilah an mon haang.
The challenge that we have now is we have very few young people who wants to do it because it's a work of patience and hard labor, and it's not an easy way to earn your money, but then we still see that it will help us, and we want to pass this on to the younger generation by using our organization to train the younger ones to be able to do it for themselves and for their future.
At mo balin an itudo atau train yang meton ninong tudo ta.
It is hoped that this age-old practice will continue. reminding them of their native ingenuity and their rootedness to their own culture and to the nurturing earth.